Yay! Nancy and the pioneers made it. The Kelseys arrived in California. But meanwhile, unbeknownst to any of them, their arrival in California was causing a sensation. Did you know California was once seen as a fortress virtually impregnable? Picture it as an island surrounded by natural barriers like towering mountain ranges, vast deserts, and the mighty Pacific Ocean. But back in 1841, a group of determined Americans breached this fortress. It was like a small mouse managing to sneak its way into a lion's den. They were a group of 30, led by the spirited duo, Ben and Nancy, who ventured into the territory, causing quite a stir. The news spread like wildfire from Sacramento to Sonoma and down to Monterey and San Jose. Picture this as a small town where everyone knows everyone else and a new family moves in. The gossip mill will be churning at full speed, right? The Californios, who were Mexican citizens in California, were already on edge. They were like a new mom anxiously watching her toddler take his first steps, fearing he might fall and trip. They had already lost Texas to a slow invasion of American settlers, and they feared California might be next on the list. So when this group of settlers showed up, they were seen as invaders. In 1841, the Mexican government was viewing all American movements with alarm. But there was one man, General Vallejo, who was not alarmed. Cecilia Holland explains in her book, this is the book where all of this is coming from, that you're finding in my book, and don't worry, it's all sourced. But anyway, here's what she says. But as Nancy Kelsey was to learn, General Vallejo was no tool of anybody. From his stronghold in Sonoma, he ruled a private estate the size of a small country, and in Alta California, he was one of the major bosses. Liberal and strong-minded, he had an open admiration for Americans. He was a friend of the American consul in Monterey, James Larkin, whose pet project was tackling prominent Californios into supporting a bid for American statehood. Instead of throwing the settlers into jail or sending them back into the wilderness, he issued them passports, including the people like the Kelseys who had gone back to the San Joaquin Valley so that they could legally stay in California. From then on, the settlers scattered off into California, but the Kelseys and several others linked their fortunes to another extraordinary emigrant, John Sutter. Sutter came down to San Jose personally to escort the Kelseys back up to his estate, New Helvetia, on the Sacramento River. The smooth and energetic Swiss must have impressed the Kelseys, especially after their experiences with Marsh. In 1841, Sutter was still young and dashing. The taste for liquor that ruined his later years had not yet begun to thicken his features and his waistline, and he affected gaudy uniforms to a decidedly Napoleonic cast with gold braid and fancy buttons and helmets with feather plumes. He was already starting to lose his hair. Nonetheless, his address, especially toward women, was superb. So when they got there, they received royal treatment. Keep in mind that Nancy Kelsey at this time was a raw-boned, half-starved, heavily pregnant 19-year-old girl who came to New Helvetia in December of 1841. The Kelseys stayed at New Helvetia all winter. In February, Nancy bore the baby she had carried in her womb across the desert and over the Sierra. A tiny girl, Sarah Jane Kelsey, lived only a few days before she died. For Nancy, the lesson was a bitter one. She had a little grave now at each end of her journey. She had come so far and gotten nowhere. But Anne throve. The child fed on the cheese and tortillas and beans and beef that stocked Sutter's tables and grew red-cheeked and bright-eyed again, walked and ran, talked and laughed. Nancy herself felt stronger, eager, ready. In the spring, with Sutter's advice and encouragement and some of Sutter's tools, she and Ben and Andy went up to Cache Creek in the western edge of the Sacramento Valley. The men hunted and Nancy took care of their camp and helped them make boots from the hides and render the fat into tallow. Nancy enjoyed this life. She raised tents for them to live in, and over the summer, they all added a makeshift cabin. She cooked and sewed and took care of Anne and sometimes went hunting with the men. Their camp lay in a little side canyon above Cache Creek where scrubby trees grew and deer came down in the morning. There were some Indians living nearby, but they bothered nobody. From the door of their tent, Nancy could look out across the broad valley and just see the peaks of the Sierra and be amazed again that she had crossed them. So yeah, she's settling down into California, but there's so much more. But isn't it fascinating that they were seen as invaders? And, you know, it's going on in our country right now that people are feeling invaded. But, you know, Americans, as they came into California, they were the first invaders. All right, see you in the next video.